And everybody, Kyle Pulsiver. Dude, I'm pretty good at this board. All right. Okay, what's up, everybody? Like I was mentioning, episode 2 of Wide Open with Chris Brandt and Kyle Pulsiver. Kyle, now episode 2 of this season, and it's 2021, almost 2022. It's flying, huh?
Mm-hmm.
How mad are you that I pulled you away from the shop this morning to sit here and talk about snowmobiles?
It's tough to leave.
It is.
She's a hard one to walk away from.
Yeah, but dude, I told you. You're up at like midnight last night working on sleds. I told you knock that off.
Well, one more leads to one more, and then eventually you just want to get one more done, and then you get one more done, then you get it clean, and then you get the next project for tomorrow ready, and then
and then it's 1 o'clock. Jeez. Well, one of these days we're gonna have to I think that's probably our next podcast topic, right? Is the one more. I mean, We have lots of one mores. We've talked about that one, but we got to incorporate some photos for you guys watching on YouTube. Some photos and videos. We got some pretty good ones there.
Yeah.
Yep. Put that mic closer.
Closer.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So anyway, what we wanted the topic for today was going to be, because I was curious about this, and we did briefly chat about this, and I think in our very last podcast last year, your experience at Jackson, but we're going to expand it a little bit. So, growing up, I had aspirations of, I don't even know if that's a word, but aspirations of going to Jackson and climbing Jackson, and, watching, Brett Rasmussen and David Shepard and Rick Ward and all of those guys that were just, legends in the hill climb circuit, and it's funny. It's just like what happens to us a lot. You're watching it from your couch and you're like, why aren't these guys making it? It doesn't even look that hard. It doesn't even look that steep. And then, you go to the hill and you ride up the chairlift, and that's when it hits you.
It's gnarly. It's icy. It's rocky. It's dirt. It's grass. It's ice. It's moguls this tall. People everywhere.
Yeah.
Flags everywhere.
So I think this will be a fun one. I think anyone who has been to Jackson Hole, you guys have an appreciation. I think that's one level of it. I think the next level of it is, that feeling when you're sitting at the starting line and know that, the next minute and a half is
all that matters.
Yeah.
That's all you get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and I think about, that's what I think about is, I've competed at Jackson. It's been quite a while, and a bunch of people want me to go back. And I'll be honest. I'm getting to the point where I think it would be something I would enjoy. I'll be honest. I didn't enjoy it when I was doing it, and I didn't enjoy it because there was a lot of pressure and I wasn't prepared. And when I enjoy pressure, like I love, getting challenged to go do a line, or when I was doing freestyle, I loved the challenge of, going to go win a contest because I was prepared. I had practiced, my equipment was good. I was confident, right? Yeah. And so that's enjoyable. But where I struggled with Jackson was it literally, I'm trying to run a business, trying to be a father, trying to be a husband, and guiding, and then just randomly throwing in, okay, let's go hill climb. And, back then it was, I could get away with it and be somewhat competitive by literally just throwing some screws in a track and, doing a couple little things to a sled. But it is so far from that now that, from the fitness program, the sled preparation, the practice, the everything, to think about what all goes into it. And that's what I want to talk to you about. You were living my world, right? I got you working 7 days a week.
Yeah. I planned on getting that sled done and having some time to practice. And I remember the 3 weeks leading up to it, I had that sled sitting over in the corner. and I was trying to get to it, but other stuff was breaking. Other client sleds were showing up. We had more work to do on our sleds, and I never got to it. And then it's like, it was 6 days before I was supposed to be in Jackson. And I was like, I have to get I have to work on my sled. And then I had to drive all over the state of Colorado to come up with some parts, overnighting parts. I mean, it was just to gather a sled, and took a sled that I had 1,500 miles on stock and put a turbo on it with the help of some awesome people. And Eric at Volk got me set up with an intercooler and a tune, and Polaris helped me with the turbo and made a sled that frickin' ripped. Like, and then I put a track in it, and I'm calling friends and people that I'd never, like, the cooler guards or whatever you want to call them inside the tunnel. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what needed to be done. So I'm pestering people at 10 o'clock at night, asking them how to build this sled and what I need, and if what tethers are legal and what belt drives are legal, what clutching's legal. Like, it had a whole other mess of rules that I had to deal with where we don't have any rules. But then I'm like, and then I didn't realize till like 3 days before the race, Andy was like, I was talking to Andy, I'm like, what do I need? He's like, do you have a chest protector? And I'm like, no. He's like, you need one of those. So I'm overnighting chest protectors, and I mean, just all kinds of stuff, and trying to pack together parts in a trailer and get it all together and get up to, I went up and stayed with Andy for, I don't think, when did I leave? I left that weekend before and went up and stayed with Andy, but just getting everything together was pretty overwhelming. And then literally, like, I left here with a sled that I hadn't had tuned, hadn't had running, nothing, bolted a bunch of parts on it, loaded it in the trailer, went up and met Volk and Chase up there at Alpine last minute, and we took the sled out and it ripped. So that was the first relief, but I mean, still a long ways from the race.
So there's, and that's why this is going to be a pretty fun podcast for me, because, you know, you're like literally describing my first 3 years of going to Jackson, right?
And then,
dude, now hold on. I will set you up here. Like, okay, so there's some things I remember about this period of time last year where I'm watching you, like,
overnight drivers. Oh shit, I need drivers. I got a different track. Colin just asking a million. I hate asking favors. I'm calling everyone I know, like, pulling all of my resources. I need, like, can you overnight me this? Can you overnight me that? Like, I'm borrowing a track from you that I wrecked, and then I'm like just borrowing a trailer from you, like stealing parts from everywhere, piling them in the trailer, wondering if you know what I forgot though? A couple extra bulkheads.
Yeah, because you ended up needing one. Two. So we'll get into that too. So couple things I remember about that week was, you know, the rear suspension goes through absolute hell, right?
Yeah.
And we live in a podunk town with not much. Okay, so you know, you needed to do reinforcement gussets and all of this stuff, and so
I couldn't get the right ones from Zonder.
Yeah.
So I actually cut the bottom shelf off my tool cart and welded.
Dude, the tool cart
together.
is still sitting out there. So Blake is our media dude. He's kicking butt this year. Blake, we've got a couple things that we need to implement into this video for the YouTube guys. Okay, so at 10 minutes, we're gonna go get a picture of
my rails,
Kyle's rails, the tool cart that is now in the scrap yard in the back that he had to cut apart. We're gonna have to.
But the steel I bought at Tractor Supply to weld onto the torque arms,
and you bent that anyway.
Yeah.
And then when we get a little bit further in the story, we'll insert Kyle's GoPro clip of bulkhead number 1.
Yep, that was a hit.
That
was a hit. I entertained everyone at the practice track. I'm pretty sure. I yard sailed I showed up. This is jumping ahead in the story, but you want to talk about showing up and feeling like an idiot, and it's just like the first. I remember. Luckily, I had Cody Monroe was in pretty much the same boat as me, but he was borrowing a sled, so he kind of cheated. All he had to do was bring gear. He borrowed one of Andy's built mod sleds, and I remember we showed up, and Andy and his brothers had a.
And this is Andy Thomas.
Andy Thomas had a gnarly course carved in, and we, me and Cody both go to hit this course, and like we just yard sail, both of us, right away, like in the second corner. And we kind of turn around and we're trying to get our bars straight and get our visors back on. And we're sitting there looking at each other and we're like, and I'm just like, what did I get myself into? And Cody's like, we just need to slow it. We need to get up the course. We need to slow it because we just flew off the course like 5 times in a row. And we're like, we just need to slow down and get up this thing. The speed will come. And I mean, from that first, it's hard because I kind of went, you go into things like, you don't tell yourself you can't do it. And you go into it, and then you kind of get a little bit. When these guys do it for a living, and they're flying. But, I mean, it came together and ended up feeling pretty good about it going into the race. But it took a few days and a lot of broken parts.
Okay, let's rewind because we jumped ahead. So,
yeah.
So you set us up pretty good. So it was, we have all these goals of getting a sled prepped and ready and dialed.
Yeah.
And so none
Double
of
snow, like, yeah, I remember in the shop, like, every step of the way, I'm like, oh, shit, they all have long snow flaps. I call Andy, I'm like, what do I need for a snow flap? He's like, it's got to touch the ground. It's got to be doubled up. I'm like, what do you mean doubled up? It's got to be riveted to your other snow flap. And I'm like, well, that's silly, but okay. So, like, doing all of this stuff. And, I mean, the skid was a day's project. Carl's revalved them for me.
the shocks.
The shocks.
Yep.
The rail braces that I had to weld pieces onto. The rear wheels, I ran a little bit heavier rear wheel, not heavy enough. The gussets I welded on the torque arms. I plated the inside of my tunnel, the cooler guards. I got a last-minute gas tank from Alpine that Chase had. I had to drive over to Grand Mesa to get the turbo, and then I had to drive to Scrambling to get the intercooler. What else did we have?
But like you said, I mean, there was
drivers. I mean, and then I was like building spare drive shafts because I was worried they all run steel drive shafts. I couldn't get the right drivers for that, so I got them for aluminum shafts. So I built 2 drive shafts in case. Yeah.
This is 3 days before you're supposed to leave.
I wanted to leave, and I was just like building this thing, and it took me. I mean, that day we guided. I got back and finally worked on my sled. The whole next day it took me to get this thing pieced together. And then I think like the next day I got it finished up in the morning, went up to Voke. They dropped everything and they dropped everything, gave me some awesome clutching. And it was a little bit tricky because we were at 9,500 feet, and I was going to be riding and racing at 6,000 or whatever it is, 5,800 or whatever, all the way to the top. So we were trying to dial that in a little bit, and we felt pretty good about the setup. And I mean, it was awesome. And Chase brought me up the hill, and we went down into that little hole and that climb out up through them rocks, and that. I remember Chase is like, oh, yeah. See how it runs here. And I'm like, I turned and went up this pole that I've gone at 100 times on 5 different snowmobiles, and I've never made it out. And I'm on screws, 155 with a stiff rear shock. 155, though, too, and lots of power. And I remember going up and, like, where I was normally turning out, I was still doing, like, 60. And I flew up the top of that, and I came down. I wanted to just hug Chase. I was like, we're good, man. Let's just go ride for a minute.
Okay, we're set.
That was – we got done in the afternoon. By the time we got the sled up on the hill, tested it, it was good. I went and tried to get a bunch of avgas in Scrambling because that was kind of the last town I'm familiar with. Pull in, the gate was open, so I pull in, drive right over to the gas pump. This little freaking airport car comes ripping over to me. You can't be in here. I'm like, well, I'm parked here. I got my cans out, and my credit card's already swiped. Like, can I just fill up the cans? And no. So I'm going up to Andy's, which I don't know. What is it, a 12-hour drive, 10-hour drive?
10, yeah.
So I drive through the night up to Andy's to test with him the next morning. And that was when I showed up on the hill, and we had, what would that have been? That would have been Sunday. And the race, I needed to be in Jackson Thursday?
On Thursday.
Yeah.
So let me stop you there for a second. So it's interesting, right? You go from 3 days of,
just
scrambling, stress, like, what am I doing? All of this stuff. Then you get on the hill, praying everything works. This sled is an absolute monster. So it went from like a bunch of, I don't know, to we got a chance here.
Yeah.
Right? I feel pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so. I mean, from everything from like putting the gear on, like wearing a little bit different gear, having to wear a chest protector, like riding different sled, like you're ditching the tunnel bags. You got to run. I mean, a little different setup, and I mean, it's just there's a lot of stuff that goes into just trying to. I mean, relatively do the same thing we do every day, but it's completely different.
So you've now spent about 42 minutes on this snowmobile. So you're feeling pretty good.
Yep.
And now you make the 12-hour drive in a borrowed trailer with a bunch of junk in there and like hoping you have enough, right? And then so now you get up to Andy's on Sunday.
Yep.
And we've got, we're 4 days until we got to go over to Jackson. And tell us how that first day, we kind of teased about it, but how'd that first day go?
So there was
so tell us who you got with you. Like
me. So the first day we had Cody Monroe, Andy was there, Andy Thomas, and both of his brothers were there, and it was good to have that many people. I could see how it'd be really tough to go practice by yourself, just because it takes a lot to break down a course like that. And I mean, we had a nasty course going that changed. I mean, if 5 guys are making laps, and I think it's changing every lap, and it was really good. And it was icy. It had been super warm there, and it was super icy in the morning. And it's a lot different snow than what we ride. Them edges of them trench walls and the edges of them bumps and stuff. I mean, they affect you a lot different. When a ski stands up on one of them, it's a lot different than what a ski stands up on here. Like, so there's a little bit more finesse and tiptoeing going on that I found.
I just started chuckling because you're talking about the ice and stuff, and we're getting to this part of the story, but when you went and free rode with Keith.
I totally forgot about that.
I know, we're getting there. See, that's why I knew this was going to be a fun one for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you pound in the course. You've got these guys who do this this is what they do.
Yeah.
Right? They have sleds set up. They train and so now you're kind of jumping in both feet.
No, head first, not both feet.
Okay.
Head first.
Yeah.
Head first in, and like I said, the first hour I was a mess, just trying to go way too fast.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot. I mean, the snowmobile's way fast. I'm at 6,500 feet. There's a shitload of power.
Lots of traction. Riding with screws.
Never rode with screws. That's
unreal?
amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yep.
Tons of traction.
I got a funny story about screws and anyway.
A 155 that I don't normally ride, and it is different. It turns quick, and I mean I liked it. I was happy with my setup, and I mean the first day went good. And I didn't shut my sled off. Like I was.
How many brake pads did you go through?
That's another topic, isn't it? So Andy's dad was there, which was awesome. He was buzzing sleds up and down the hill for us, and he brought up some gas and brought up oil and everything we needed, and I was kind of using him as a little bit of a mentor, and he was just laughing at me the whole time.
Shocking.
And it started, I'd say by the end of the day, I was finally okay, this is going to work. And the next day, we go back up there.
So did you ride on Sunday or was it Monday?
It would have been Sunday.
Okay.
Sunday. That would have been Sunday. So the first day went good, and I didn't break anything.
We didn't have to go. Well, now that's leading into this day, and this day didn't go very good.
No, so now we're here. We're on to
Monday.
Second day.
It's crunch time.
Well, anyway, I get to go back. Andy's awesome. He's got a shop in town. He's got a house there, and me and Cody went and crashed at his house. I mean, his girlfriend cooked breakfast, lunch, dinner. Awesome place to stay. Next morning we get up, and I'm like,
I'm a little sore.
A little more sore than normal. It's brutal. Holding on to that sled, and you're purposely just pounding. It's a lot different. It's a different animal. I mean, it got loosened up, and we went back up the hill. And that course that we made from the day before was ice. Oh. And it was good. I mean, it was even more finesse, and then Andy started making. He's like, we need to make a new course and cross this course a whole bunch. Which I was like, yeah, I'm totally along. I'm listening to everything I can possibly listen to, watch, see, trying to just do what he's doing, And there was some really fun little when we were crossing the course, jumping it, but then you'd come the next time and be blown out, and you'd just have to be you'd have to look really far ahead, but like have a cross eye down a little bit for some of them smaller bumps. And I came around this one corner that was, it was banked right into some little shrubby trees in a big trench, and you could come into it, really fast. And you'd put that bottom ski down in that trench and, rail around that thing, and they'd come out and you'd come into a wheelie, and there was like 3 bumps and a little jump where you'd jump the course from the day before. Mm-hmm. And I came around that corner, and it's not like a corner that you come into slow. You kind of just carry speed through it. You're not wide open, but you're carrying a lot of speed. And I came around it, and that ski stood up. It hit a bump and stood up on the inside of that track, and it was enough. It pitched the sled straight hard right, and it flattened the sled out on me. And it jumped. I was off the snow. It might not have been much, but I was off the snow, and there's a tree, like an 80-footer. This big.
Dude, hold on.
Right here.
You have some small arms. It was like this big.
It was
that
huge.
GoPro video. It was one of those ones you watch and I was just like, oh.
Everybody, of course, is taking a break, sitting there watching me come around this corner. I'm like, I'm going to rail this thing this time. I come around, hit that bump with that inside ski, stand that ski up, and it flops the sled straight out like this, and it's that tree. And I'm wrong foot forward on this side of the sled. And it crotched it right inside the ski.
Yeah.
Both A-arms. So anyway, I was wrong foot forward. I was on the tree side, and luckily I hit the tree so hard and my leg got hung up so good on the handlebars that it flipped me over the other side of the sled, like somersaulted me. And I landed on the other side of the sled. I dumped an 80-foot tree. I dumped all the snow off it.
Dude, I saw it, and I'm like,
impressive.
Kyle, you almost just died. So Blake, 23 minutes, we'll be inserting Kyle's death GoPro.
So everybody comes down, and they're like, you all right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And they're like, no, because I hit it hard. And they're like, are you all right? And I'm like checking out. I'm like, oh God, don't tell me the bulkhead. Don't tell me the bulkhead. And I'm like, oh God, my leg hurts. Oh, my shoulder kind of hurts. And I'm like, oh, my face really could have hurt. So I go over to the sled. I'm like, oh, yeah, both A-arms. That's all right. The shock's fine. Good, because I don't have any more revalve shocks. So I'm like, oh, the shock's all right, both A-arms. I'm like, oh, shit, the bulkhead. So it kinked the backside of the bulkhead in. And by now, it was probably like 4 o'clock. And we had a good day of that day actually went well for me for the most part. I was able to get up and down the course consistently, and it was fun. I was having a blast with it. And anyway, I'm like, so I get back down. I'm like, I got to go down, the phone signal. I get going down the hill, and I get down, and I'm like, saying, Skinner is right by Andy. I'm like, saying, you got any bulkheads or junk sleds laying around that you have a ruined tunnel on or something? He's like, no, sorry, man.
And Sam's like, no, I haven't ridden yet this year. So. No, because I'm just giving Sam some crap because the number of bulkhead tunnels that I still have in the backyard from saying is pretty impressive.
So, I text Dan Adams up in Alpine. I'm like, Dan, you got a tunnel bulkhead laying around or a right side of the bulkhead laying around? And he's like, no, I'll ask a couple people. And I don't know who else. Andy had a bunch of buddies.
4 o'clock on Monday. You got to be in Jackson on Thursday.
Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So Andy's texting buddies, and he's got he knows the owner of the dealership literally across the street from his house, and he called him, and he was like, and by now it's 6, 7 o'clock at night. He calls him. And he's like, hey, you got a bulkhead? Or do you have anything laying around? He's like, yeah, but it's pretty mangled. And we're like, is the right side of the bulkhead good? And he's like, I think so. Meet me in there tomorrow morning at 7. I'm like, okay, well, that's about my only chance. Otherwise, I texted Darren, too, from Polaris. So I'm like, hey, man, I might need a bulkhead.
I might need a spare snowmobile.
A bulkhead overnighted if by chance that is a possibility. And he's like, seriously? So
damn it, Cap.
I know. So we go over to the dealership in the morning, and I smoked them handlebars hard with
now, hold on, let me stop one thing. So I text you. I was checking on my buddy every night. How'd it go today? First day, same thing. Man, it's getting better. And then the second day, so the day you wrecked, I said, how'd it go? And you didn't say anything. You just sent me that video. And I'm like, are you alive? I'm like, yeah, this is all going very to plan. Oh God. Okay, so sorry. So now we're at
the
Tuesday morning.
At the dealership, and we get in there, and I'm like, and I see the bulkhead, and the right side's good. I'm like, sweet. Go back to the trailer. And I pull everything. Everything off the right side of the snowmobile. Motor mounts, turbos on that side. Everything's on that side. Heating up all the glue, and I actually pulled the steering parts. Everything has to come off. I pulled the bulkhead right out from underneath the snowmobile. Had everything else propped up on like a board that I found outside in the trailer, working in the slush, and then I have that tunnel bulkhead there. I have to heat that all up outside and pull that half of the bulkhead off, stick it on my snowmobile, bolt it all back together, and Andy comes out, and it's probably like 9:30 now, and he comes out, and I'm like just riveting on my plastics back on, and he brought me out a plate of waffles, and he's like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You ready to go ride?" And he's like, "Damn, dude, let's go riding, I guess." So
that's what happened last night. I went to go cook you pizza. I come out, 3 sleds were done. I'm like, good Lord, dude, it's been 17 minutes.
But so we do the same thing, and that day it's Tuesday now, and we go up the hill, and Keith, Curtis, and Luke Rainey
and the Polaris guys are here.
They were coming for Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday. Okay,
but they were there. They were in town hanging out. I think we played cards that night before.
024, huh?
Yeah, we played some cards. Did a little. Our business isn't done with Team Darren's from Polaris. We got some business to finish yet, but
that's another podcast.
But anyway, we got
a new
bulkhead.
Yeah,
a new bulkhead. We got Luke.
Yep.
We got Keith, and I think that's all that was there.
So Thomas boys.
Yep.
Cody's still with you.
Yep.
Okay, and now we got Luke and Keith.
So I got even more people to watch, try to figure out how to do this.
Yeah, cool.
And we carved out another course that day, and it got super nasty right away. There was rocks in it. There was junk in it. There was like this sweeper at the top that you literally hit at like 70 miles an hour, and there was a road that you'd jump, and you'd probably go, 80 feet off. You'd be this far off it, but like hitting a road full boost, like you'd just fly off this road going up this hill, and it was super fun. And I'm like, we tested that day probably only till like 3 o'clock. And, that kind of brings me back to my brake thing. I'm really hard on brakes.
Really?
This is day 3 of testing. This is my 3rd brake rotor and 3rd set of brake pads. And I'm like making these laps. I think I could do 5 laps on good brake fluid. By the end of the day, no. So I was bleeding brake fluid, new brake fluid every day. Anyway,
now people will probably ask why is that?
There's just so much power. There's all these bumps, and you're constantly when you hit a bump, you don't want to get off the gas, but you're setting that front end back down over it. Or if you're wheeling a little bit, there's times where you'll tap that brake. You're constantly on the brake. And part of it probably is too, you're honestly probably dragging that brake a little bit, just the way you're holding on. And
it's something we kind of struggle with riding here too.
Yeah. And then so I'm making laps, and the
fluid and brakes, and
Keith and Luke are like, dude, stop, just take a break, because they'd go down, they'd take a break, and I'd just keep going. I'd go until I'm like I go to turn around, come downhill, and I'm like this coming down the hill because I have no brakes. And they're like, dude, just take a break. And I'm like, I got 8.5 gallons of fuel. I'm burning every gallon of this. And so we make laps, and it was super fun getting to ride with, Keith, obviously, top of the game guys. Just, Andy, Luke, Keith, all of them. They're just.
What is it like, Kyle? I would, in the backcountry, we feel very confident, and we're at the top of our game, and then you come into their world where they are, right?
That's, riding in the backcountry with those guys is like, I look up to those guys, so I wouldn't say it's not intimidating, but you feel, confident, and you feel like, you're there to play. Mm-hmm. And then going to like their world and this hill climb that, they were I mean, they're as good as it gets at it. And it's just it's really humbling, just like watching how they approach things and how like you see it kind of all comes together. The way their styles are a little bit different in the backcountry, and it all kind of starts to make sense when you see it on a course. It's like, oh, this makes more sense. You see that 2 foot on the running boards, and I found myself like not comfortable with it at all. At the beginning. I could not, like, there was certain corners I'd see Keith does it a lot, and I mean he's just giant. Like, he's got 6 foot arms, 6 foot legs, and he can get so far in front of that sled and put so much ski weight on that sled
to make it turn.
And just watching him, the way that 2 foot thing was something I was working on, because I'd see Andy do it. I think Keith does it more than Andy, but seeing them in certain corners go 2 footed, and the bumps that you can hit and the speed you can carry with that 2 foot maneuver, but it's still, I don't feel the control there as much, and it started to get to me more towards like this was my 3rd or 4th day testing now, and that control in that position, it's just a little bit weird. My arms, I just wouldn't say you can hold on as well with the arms. It kind of, you're at a balance point where if you hit a bump hard and get on the brakes, it's going to push you forward and twist you off the sled, where
you're needing it to go right because you're at a vulnerable point.
Yeah, and there's fast points to it. And like I found one corner, we had one corner, a tight corner up towards the top of the course, where there was like this tight, you'd come in fast kind of out of a long side hill, and you'd turn sharp, and there was a big bump. And like I'd come around that thing wrong foot forward, and I'd have to get to neutral to hit that bump. Where if I was 2 foot on the running boards, I could get my butt over that seat, and I could still hit that bump wide open and jump it straight. Where if you're wrong foot forward, I mean, there was a couple times where I came around, hit that bump wrong foot forward, and I mean, my feet, you get
off.
Yeah, you get kicked up. And so it was cool. I mean, watching those guys ride, and it was super fun. And the last ones, like Andy went down and Luke went down, and everybody was down the hill kind of over it, and me and Keith were still up there. And I mean, Keith's just like us. It's like we're squirrel. Like I mean, it's the same thing. We're snowmobilers. I mean, no matter what. And we're on these. He had a practice sled. I'm on my race sled, my one and only sled that needs to go to Jackson. Like, and we're on our.
This is better than Jack's. This was my favorite part of the story was this, because I'm just like envisioning me being there, like shaking my head, saying, "You guys are effing idiots."
Oh, but it was dumb. It was so dumb. We're going down the trail, and it's like 8,000 feet, and they've had really strong spring conditions. It's saturated. The creeks are open. The willows are opening up the pockets in the snow. The rocks are starting to show.
It's junk.
It was pretty good. But we're coming down the trail. We're down from like 8,000 feet. We come down we're down close to the parking lot, like probably 6,800 feet, 7,000 feet. And Keith's like, he's so casual. Like, there's pretty monotone with him. You know what I mean? He pulls over on the trail. He's like, "You want to go for a rip?" I'm like, everything in my head, like, of course, everything in my body wants to. And everything in my head is like, I'm like, the smart person in me and like the maturity side would say that's a terrible idea. For one chance of like, I mean, it's gnarly. Like, we're looking across we got to get across this creek, and we're looking at this like shelfy pillow zone, like where like you have these options. I mean, it's constant switchbacks to gain these shelves. And like, I mean, if you ditch that sled, like it's going to drop off like, I mean, 4 different 40-foot drops like down this thing, and it's logs, and it's a no-fall zone.
Your sled is yelling at you, "Please don't." Your body is saying, I'm kind of ready. Your mind is saying, just pretend you didn't hear Keith ask that question and just keep going.
Yeah. But so anyway, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So he turns up it, and he goes, and it was kind of like a little spine like this on there, and the pillow's here, and we got up in these logs, got way up high, and he kind of.
And what's the snow like down there?
And he was on a stalker.
Was it slippery, or was it okay?
It was soft snow. It was, I mean, spring snow where it was hard, and probably 6 inches had softened up. And but probably about 6 inches had softened up.
When you were looking at it, were you thinking about, I think we can get up, but coming down might be.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, coming down is gonna suck. But like, I mean, I got boost. And there's a ton of like bumps, so it's like them ones you want to like wheelie into and just kind of you want to pick a straight line, that, or you got to do a lot of zigzagging. And Keith was on a stalker, and he started zigzagging, and I saw a freaking line. And there was logs and like some bumps in it, and I got over the main shelf where he turned, and I got over the main shelf, and I went up and up and up. And it's that snow where when you lock up the brake, it packs the track, and you just go faster. Anyway, I get up to a pretty sweet point, and I just turn out, and I just stop on edge. And then Keith comes up, and Keith comes up to me, and he's like, dude, that was sick. And from there, it wouldn't have been a big deal going down. I mean, it would have been it would have been fast, but there was plenty of points to zigzag. And he's like, he's like, I think we could get up there. And we're looking up, and there's some rock croppings up above us, and it's kind of where the trees are starting. It was so steep down there. It was just, it must have been a boulder field or something. And we're looking around the corner, and he's like, I think we get around that. And it was the same thing. It was one of them, we came around that little spine, and I could tell it got slippery, but it was like, no. To the left. And we came around that corner, and there was one of them alleyways kind of to heaven there. And we come around that corner, and there's an alleyway, and Keith went up, and I come around that corner, and it's not like, it's snow that like, even if you couldn't stop on it, because if you stopped, it would just elevator on you. Yeah. So like, you have to maintain momentum. If you stop, because you have to pull it further on edge, you're just going to slide down the hill. So we come around that corner, shoot up to the top, and Keith comes up, and he turns like this and stops on edge. And I'm like right behind him, and I come in, and I come right above him, and I stop, and I got that spindle to dig, luckily to punch through that snow. My spindle punched through the snow, and my track washed a little bit, so I'm a little bit nose high. And he's like, man, this snow got slippery, because we just got around that little aspect. And he's like, he's like, let's head down. And now, I mean, we had to have gained, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet. And he goes to drop that front end and take off, and that sled, he pins it, and it's so hung up on that running board. The snow is so hard. He pins it and has to let that sled go all the way to here. And I've never, Keith is like he's one of the best riders in the world. And like watching that, like him, it was so close, and he went down flying through these trees, locked up brakes like this.
Because he was going to get high-sided, so he had to pin it, and it's this moment where you are like, should I bail or do I stay? Yeah. And he had to stay because of what the consequences were.
Yeah. Had to stay in it. And luckily that sled
my palms are sweating hearing this story.
He found the perfect little trees to slow him down, and he got down through this really clean area. And it was like where if the first guy held the brakes down it cleaned off that slush to just straight ice.
I got a story about that. A-holes. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah, you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
That's the last time I'm ever riding with you guys again. I almost died. I was helicoptering above my snowmobile, my body. Oh, my God. Anyway, another story.
Well, so I go because my skis stood up a little bit in the snow, which was good. That's what stopped me.
But you're washed out.
I'm washed out a little bit.
So you're good. You're set up for the exact same scenario, unfortunately, that Keith had.
Yeah. So I kick out my front ski, trying to make like a path for that ski to drop down into.
And normally you would just have pinned it and died. But so good, right? You need to pull that front end down a little bit to get going.
Well, so I kicked the ski out, and I didn't dare move the sled, because like the front end of the sled, because that spindle or that ski was sitting on a ledge, and if it would have fallen below that ledge, it would have been sliding.
Yep.
So Keith's 200 yards below me. He gathered it up, got back on left edge. I'm sitting up there, and he's like, I don't know what he said. Something like,
you're gonna die.
Yeah, that was Harry. He stopped. He wouldn't stop unless he was like, this guy's probably gonna die up there. So he stops, and he's watching me, and I kick out that ski. I go to the back, and I pull the back end up the hill.
Yeah. And it's on edge still.
Yep.
On freaking Mount Everest cliff here.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I go to take off. It does the same thing to me. But it wouldn't even, it hung up so hard on that running board, it didn't take off until it was all the way like this. And I got it. So I jumped all the way across the sled, go to get it on left edge. I go into this elevator. I've got the sled fully pitched, and I'm butt in the snow. Like, I'm as far back on that sled, holding that sled as I can. Yeah. And I drop all the way down, and I hit it.
So you're sliding down
left
elevator.
Edge. I'm full counter steer. I'm laying on my back. I mean, this hill is straight up and down. I'm elevatoring wide open. I mean, I'm doing honestly 20 miles an hour maybe, and I'm just bouncing across these old tracks, and there's these little trees down below me, and one of them trees caught that ski, and it freaking high-sided me so hard. Like, you know what it is. Like, I jumped the sled because my foot's still on the running board. I jumped the sled, ditched the bars, and I'm like looking down like this. And I mean, you know what it's like when you high-side on a hill. It's like this. You feel like you're 30 feet off the ground. And I had land feet first, pogo stick into the ice, and I'm just like looking behind me. And luckily that sled hung up in them trees.
It was going to be coming
and Keith
for you.
is just like, he's like, he comes up, he's like, you couldn't have paid, I don't know what he said, something like, you couldn't have paid me to ride that sled out of there or something. I'm like, yeah, I was not in a good spot. And I'm like, it went pretty good for how bad it went, really. Anyway, he comes up and helps me. We get out of the tree, and it was still both of us dragging on the sled to get it down around a couple more trees. And we get down there, and we're still, instead of being 1,500 feet above the trail, we're like 1,495 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we go, so we pick our way back down, and we get back around that corner, and then that made that seem a lot better, and we played around there a little bit, and we make it back down to the trucks, or we go back down the hill and back out to the trucks, and I'm just like, on the way home, I mean, I'm pumped, and it was fun, but I was just like, God, you idiot, you could have just totally ruined everything you had, like losing that sled or getting hurt up there. Somewhere that just was kind of pointless to do, but it was, I mean, I don't regret it. So,
yeah.
But, so that was.
It's funny, as you're telling that story, we have ridden that terrain, and I know the terrain. So this is Alpine area, I'm assuming, right? Alpine. Whatever.
Star Valley.
It's all just the same. It's like incredibly cool, steep as it gets, and
the features
are it's like one of our favorite places to ride. And when the snow is good, I love it. When the snow is like I mean, I think I've told that story, but it was, it was so uncomfortable that it wasn't fun. Like at that point where I had 4 guys in front of me, they took all the snow. I literally, and this is, I went into something knowing that I was going to crash. Like there was no way that I could save it, but I had no option. What was I going to do? Like walk down and leave my snowmobile?
Yeah.
I mean, I was sitting there saying, this is going to be bad. And I just went down it anyway.
It was a tight gully with shrubs, big shrubby trees like on the right, like 12, 14 footers. To the left, the terrain didn't let you go left.
It didn't.
It just wouldn't let you go left. It was too steep. You couldn't get over there. You had to come in on 2 skis, slide in that track, come down, and luckily everybody was able to stay left of this big tree. And because so many people had gone down it, that berm just kept getting blown out farther to that tree. I came down one before you.
Yeah.
And I was coming down sliding, and I couldn't stay left. So I literally turned right and plowed through, I mean, countless trees like this big. Like, just plowed them down. And then
a little warning would have been nice, Pulsifer.
I'm still sliding like this, trying to stop. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and I see Chris come down it. And now there's no option right. There's no option. Like, the left line, it didn't put you there. So you came down, and that was the gnarliest crash I've ever seen you. I mean, that ski crotched that tree.
Oh,
and
dude.
I don't know what type of distance you got over them bars, but, I mean, it was impressive.
Dude, everyone down there thought I was dead.
Everyone down there, like, it's usually somewhat funny when somebody hits a tree or, like, something like that happens, but everybody was like, oh, no, and, like, everybody starts their sleds and comes running back up there, but, yeah, that was gnarly.
Yeah. So, as you're telling that story, all I'm thinking about is, like, I know exactly what you're talking about, and, when that snow is like that when you can't get the front end down and that back end is washing, it wants to high side you, but then the last thing you want to do is to give it gas to go faster down something that you're going to be out of control, but you have to. It's such a intense moment there, and it's where, like, you get put into this very uncomfortable spot, and no matter if you fail or win on that, it's going to gain you experience. And so, it's funny. We're 45 minutes into this podcast. We haven't even got to Jackson yet, which is kind of fun, right? But, so that's my point. Like, you got down to the truck. You said, boy, that was stupid. But I promise you will never forget that line. You will never forget what you did right, what you did wrong, what you could have done different, and how you gained another confidence in yourself and your ability there.
Yeah, and I mean, just getting comfortable with that
With
sled.
dying,
And I mean, there's something. I mean, it might sound a little weird and psycho, but the feeling of not being. I mean, the feeling of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, or like that feeling is just. I mean, on the snowmobile, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
As far like being in that type of terrain, that with that type of consequence, but yet with confidence. Like, you have all the skills and the tools to execute it, but you just know how bad it could go.
Mm-hmm.
If one mistake, like where, I mean, there's a lot of terrain out there that you can ride where, I mean, one mistake is you're stuck or just up against a tree. But like being in that type of terrain, one mistake, it just kind of changes the whole dynamic of what you're doing.
And I think that's what's really fun, and we'll need to get back on topic here, but I think you're describing exactly what, when we are up in what we love to call Narville and we go do a line and someone says, dude, what if you wouldn't have made it right there?
Don't even look at it.
And I'm like, oh yeah, that would have been bad.
Don't even see it.
I have, it's a side hill essentially, right? It's a side hill, and yeah, you can't not make it, but it's what we practice and what we strive to be good at. So, okay, so let's back to it. So
actually,
oh God,
this was the night I get back to the trailer, and I work on a lot of sleds, and I can kind of know some sounds and some hints, right? So I shut the sled off when I get back to the trailer. Dude, look at this thing. It's in one piece. I can't believe it. I'm going to go eat a steak tonight, get a good night's rest, wake up in the morning, and we were doing a test and tune. All the Polaris guys were coming to Afton there. We were going to go up and do a test and tune, make sure everything's good, data log sleds. It's kind of the exact elevation of Jackson, which we had been riding a little bit higher. And I shut my sled off, and I hear the turbo. And
I've never heard that before.
Oh, God. I start it. I shut it off again. You could hear and I'm like, oh, no.
The wheels.
Pull the intake side off of the turbo, and my wheels hitting the compressor. And I've had this happen before, and I'm like, oh, no.
So you lost the bearing.
Bearing on the turbo is done for. Yep. So now, same thing. I'm like, hey, Shane, you got any center sections laying around by chance have a turbo? And he's like, no, sorry, man. He's like, Dan would be your best bet for Boondocker stuff. And I'm like, Dan, buddy, for the third time in 2 days, I need help again. do you have a center section for a Boondocker turbo laying around? He's like, no, man. He's like, call Steven up in Idaho Falls. So I call Steven, and he's like, yep, be up here tomorrow, 7 a.m. He's like, we'll get your turbo rebuilt.
Did you get your steak?
No, I'm tearing my sled apart. I mean, I had to tear my whole turbo kit off. Had to tear the center. I tore it. He's like, he's like, bring me the center section. We'll rebuild it in the morning. So I got to disassemble. I took hot blower housing off. Took all the housings off. Took coolant lines off it. Everything. So I get in my truck, and I have I'd be there at 7. It was like a 3.5 hour drive or something. So get up early, drive up to Idaho Falls. I'm there. They rebuild my turbo, give me a couple T-shirts, tell me good luck, and I'm like, thank you. So I fly back down. I get back down. Andy was bugging me. He's like, hey, when are you gonna be back? He's like, we're just going up for test and tune. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be behind you a little bit. So I get back, get in the trailer, throw this thing together, hook up the trailer, and then I drive back down to Afton to meet them guys. And I mean, the turbo, that's what's like, I was so pumped on the sled. Now I'm just like, I hate variables, especially this late.
Yeah.
Like switching things. Like I knew what had worked. I mean, I probably put 200 or 300 miles on it testing, and I'm like, I knew it worked. Everything was happy. And luckily the sled still ran really good. Them new turbos are a little bit tighter.
Tight, yeah.
So, I mean, my bottom end was a little bit different, but sled still ran really good. Me and Andy carve out a little track. And then, like, Keith's giving me pointers, too, over on, like, this little, like, kind of, and it was something I wish I would have practiced more. Keith had this little, like, it was a section of the trail there, honestly. But it was like a single track and a half wide. It wasn't like a 2-ski mark. It was a little bit wider. And it was just a bumpy, flatter trail with just kind of more slight corners in it, kind of like the bottom of Jackson, that I never practiced that much, and I should have. And so I was making a bunch of laps on that course and making laps on the other one. Throw a data logger on the sled. The sled's really happy. Everything's running good. Pull back in, park the sled. I'm in the Polaris trailer. I think I was out because Keith has 5 sleds, and I have 1. So I was like, Keith's got 5 sleds, and I'm helping him. I'm running some sleds back and forth to his trailer for him, switching some clutch and helping him out. And I go walking back out to my sled, and I'm like, oh, no. Track's ripped. Track's ripped all the way.
Wait, whose track is ripped?
Yours. The borrowed track. The track that I borrowed is ripped.
Boy, if that track could tell stories too. So that was the track off of my X Games Hillcross sled.
Yeah.
So that thing had already been through a hellacious life, and then it didn't know what happened when Pulsifer got behind it.
With a ton of horsepower and rocks and junk. And so I got a ripped track, and I'm like, I go back in the player's trailer, and I'm like, Darren, come look at my track. And he's like, and I was like, I talked to a couple other people, and Andy was like, he's like, it would probably hold together, but like if one comes undone and starts slapping,
yeah.
I mean, so I'm like, oh, not again, Dan, what do you got for tracks, man? And I had my extroverts and my anti-stab set up for 3-0 pitch. So he's like, and all those guys were running a Camzo track in a different pitch. So nobody had a. So anyway, I got a 3-0 pitch. I'm like, Dan, do you have a 3-inch 155? Because that's what I needed. I needed a 3-inch pitch track. And he's like, no, I don't. Sorry, dude. So I then I text Sane again. I'm like, hey, you got a 3-0 pitch? You got anything 3-0 pitch 155?
I can't believe these guys keep answering
They're
your
still
call.
answering, and Sane's just like laughing face. He's like, he knows the program. And so I go down the list again. Andy calls people he knows. We call. Then I just start hopping on players, dealers stuff, and I hop on like Facebook Marketplace, and I'm like looking for a track.
And this is Wednesday, dude.
And Andy's like, looking at, Andy's like, one of my buddies has his sled in my shop, and I think it's a 3-0 pitch, so he ran back there. It's not a 3-0 pitch. And we were going to just take his buddy's track off and start cutting it and screwing it. So I'm like, Darren, I couldn't find a track. He's like, okay, I'll get you one. So he has this person he knows in Jackson. So the next day we need to be in Jackson.
Yeah, it's Thursday.
Yeah, it's race day.
It's trailers roll in time.
Yeah, trailers roll in time. So I'm like, I got a ripped track, and I'm like, oh, my sled runs good. I guess I'm gonna park it. So I parked the sled, and Darren's like, I'll get your track. I'm like, how are you gonna do that? He's like, overnight one. So he's like, phone's Rosso. Hey, throw a track on a plane. Need it in Jackson Hole tomorrow morning. And I'm just like, oh God, what is this? I'm going to sell my truck. I'm like, so this is the day before the race. Now I need a track. So thank God this track shows up. He ordered it to just some business in town. And I go to this guy's business, and luckily it was there. So I run back to the trailer, and I'd never cut a track before. And I'm like asking these guys, I'm like, how do you do it? So, and no one brings their track. They bring tracks. And I could have borrowed a track from somebody, but nobody had a spare drive shaft. So I could have borrowed it because people bring spare tracks.
Yeah.
But I had a 3-0 pitch, and everybody else was running 3.5s or 2.86 pitch tracks, or the 2.4. What are the 2.4s?
That's a 2.52. Now we know.
See, that's a 2.52, and that's what everybody was running.
Mm-hmm.
On the turbo sled, Justin was the only one that ran a 3.0 pitch.
Okay.
And I couldn't come up with a drive shaft, so now I'm like, I don't have the right screws. Andy was like, dude, those screws don't work. They were too fine thread. He's like, you need the coarse thread. He's like, you'll throw one of them through a cooler. I'm like, oh, God. So now I'm like asking favors. I'm asking Sam Peterson and Toby, and I'm like, you guys got any extra screws? And Andy was the one actually making laps for screws, and he comes back with 3 different bags of screws from 3 different people, razor blades. So I'm in the trailer, and my dad and brother were actually there too, which was kind of fun. And like, we're tag teaming this track, right? Somebody's holding a torch, 2 people on razor blades, one person's I got Sam in there, Andy, my dad, my brother, me, and we're all doing something like heating blades. I mean, moving the jig.
So to help describe this, so the track comes
3-inch pit, 3-inch lug,
3-inch lug, and you have to cut the top off to give you some meat to put the screws in.
Yeah. So we cut it down to 2 inches, and so we're just cutting lugs in the trailer, throw some screws in it, and we're like, I got 2 impacts rolling where everybody's just ramming screws in, and so I get the track screwed, get the track in the sled. And I'm like, I'm going to go run up the hill and test it. So I actually...
So this is Thursday.
And
did you go park the trailer that morning? So you're at Jackson or no?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
we're in the pits.
You're in the pits doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
You get your
So it's amateur day too.
Yeah.
So, but we didn't have to race, but we had to be there.
okay.
So amateur day, we're in the pits, and then at like 3 o'clock, we were done with everything we needed to do, like sign-in wise and all that stuff. So Keith was running up the hill over on or something.
It was
The one way over.
Yeah. Keith would like to let everyone know it's over on Togety or something.
We'll cut that part out.
Yeah.
We run up the pass to go test, and actually there was a whole ton of people up
56 minutes. Okay.
There was a whole bunch of people up on the pass. Like everybody was up there just making laps kind of on the trail, making sure their stuff's all good before the race. And we actually built another course, and like that track, I really liked that track. The first track, your track that I had, and I felt like that track was different. That track was a little bit different. So just getting used to the new track. Rode quite a bit that day. Felt good.
How are we doing on brake pads and rotors?
Oh, we're deep. That's another favor I'm asking. I'm like, Darren, you got any more brake pads? Darren, you got any more brake rotors? Like, because they were what do you call it? You couldn't buy them.
Yeah, I know.
Because otherwise I would have.
I tried after Jackson. They were all on back order.
They were all back
Pulsifer.
ordered. Couldn't find any, but luckily they had some stashed away. So now it's the next day.
Okay, so when you went up, you felt good with your sled. No drama there. Nothing happened.
Yeah, everything worked good.
Okay, so here's what I want to do. We're an hour in. We're gonna do
This is the road to Jackson.
I know. We're gonna end the podcast here, and we're gonna do a part 2. We're gonna talk about that. Well, maybe we'll do one tonight, or maybe let's do one tomorrow morning or something. But where I want to start tomorrow was you kind of fast forward through a part that I actually think is really cool, and I think our listeners would think is really cool, and that is here you are on Wednesday. You got all the big guns. You got Keith Curtis with his 5 sleds, Luke Rainey with all his sleds, the Thomas boys, all this. And you've got Polaris Factory. You got the factory here. This is how serious they take this, right? Mm-hmm. We're sending the big rig. We're sending all of our top guys. And we're going to ensure that we do what we always do, and that's kick everybody's ass at Jackson.
That's a one and only goal, and yeah, they
and
spare
so
no
we
expense.
kind of fast forward through that part. So that we're going to start with that in part 2 of Kyle Pulsifer's extremely awesome adventure.
This was 4 days.
We haven't even raced Jackson yet.
Yeah.
So we were talking this morning. Kyle was a little grumpy that I took him off shop duty to come in here, and I had an idea. I'm like, what do you think we talk about Jackson? Because I'm feeling pretty pumped up right now.
Yeah, it was probably one of the funnest parts of the year. Just that whole week, it was just so last minute and like not knowing what to do, like going to this riders meeting and the sign up, and I'm like, it's not like filling out these sponsor sheets and stuff for the announcer, and like they're like, show your racing achievements, and I'm like, first race, I don't know, never raced before. Luckily, I guess that's another thing too. You got really lucky. Lucky and had the right friends and got lucky enough to get an invite actually.
And we're going to talk about that too, because I did the same. I had never done a hill climb, and there's a lot of pressure on you for that, right?
Oh yeah, I get to come, and it's tough, right? You're riding that, so like
these guys have to qualify.
Jackson, in order to go to Jackson, you have to be. They have to win. There's one race you can win that gets you an entry, or you have to have a certain amount of rim shot points. So all these guys that are there deserve to be there,
100%.
Have work to be there, have tons into sleds, trucks, trailers, the time into racing. They're there. This is what they do. Like, they spend a ton of time and money doing this, and I feel guilt. Like, I get this invite from Polaris. It's literally like, it's just a freebie to go to Jackson and race in pro classes. Like, normally you have to come through the amateur ranks, come through semi-pro to get to a pro class, and you have to get these points to qualify. And I get lucky enough to get an invite, and like I'm sitting in the factory Polaris trailer with all these factory Polaris riders, and like I'm sitting in there getting the same help, getting the same stuff, and I'm way more high maintenance than them. I'm just like, what do I do now? Where do I go? Like, what do I need to sign? Who do I need to go pay? Where do I get my number? Like, what sheets do I need to fill out? Like, and I don't like feeling like that. I don't like feeling, and luckily, like I'd be, as a rider, like I could see where some of those other guys, like, would kind of like, it would be kind of frustrating to them, right?
100%.
Like they've worked so hard for this. And
they only get one. They only
some,
qualified for one class or two classes, right?
And I'm some kid that's just like watched this stuff on YouTube since I was 3 years old and always wanted to do it. And somehow, like, I told the right guy that, hey, I'd like to race Jackson. He's like, okay. And then my phone rings from the race director at Polaris, and they're like, hey, I heard you want to race Jackson. What classes do you want to race? And Darren's like, he's racing open mod and 900 mod. And it's just like, and he's like, if you're going to Jackson, you're racing pro, you're racing open mod, and you're racing 9 mod. And that was when I, like, originally had just planned on building a skid and racing a stock sled.
Yeah.
And now that was when Darren was like, nope, if you're going, you're racing the top classes. And I'm just like, then I'm like, that's when I, like, the internet's going crazy, and I'm ordering. I got to get all these other parts, and I'm, like, putting this mod sled together now versus a stock sled. Still last minute, but now I got to build a mod sled. So anyway, I'm sitting there, and it's just like, for me, that bugs me to feel like I was there, like, just, I don't like the free ride. Like, I don't want to feel like that. But, like, those guys were so nice, and, like, I mean, I didn't want to, like, overstay my welcome or do anything like that, so I was just like, and asked, like, they were coming to me and helping me, and I just was, like, really humbled by that, by, like, how nice all them guys were. Like, I mean, everyone, like, Luke Rainey, like, Keith, Andy, Justin, all the guys at Polaris, Brandon Tittenser, like, all of those guys were, like, just helping me with everything. Like, and then they were, like, giving me advice, and, like, Dan's giving me advice and texting me, and, like, everybody, like, the Instagram messages, and, like, all of these guys that were just, like, giving me all this, as much advice as they could, and it was really cool, like just to have that too. Yeah,
it's literally verbatim of what my experience was, and you feel so you're kind of walking. You're walking in like kind of. I feel a little uncomfortable here, and they just with open arms say, welcome, let's get you up to speed, and good luck. You know, so
they're like, I mean, it was the same all the way to race day, like pulling sleds into the pits. Like, I didn't know what I did. You know what I did? I just about got DQ'd for it.
Started your sled
without a helmet on.
Yeah.
Started my sled without a helmet on.
No, I never know. I didn't do that.
And I got my butt chewed.
Yeah.
In the pit. It was in the pits too. It was in the pits, and I started my sled without my helmet on, and the tether has to be hooked up.
Yep.
Luckily, I had the tether hooked up because I remembered that, but I literally started the sled after the track change. I just started it, and I shut it. I made sure my kill switch worked because I had all that apart too, and I made sure my kill switch and my tether and everything worked. So, like, anyway, just, like, there's a million parts to it, and just learning as I went, but...
Yeah. Well, awesome. So we're gonna clip this one, and we're gonna go round 2. Either I know you're gonna be working late tonight, but we'll maybe do another one tomorrow morning because this was a lot of fun. And we'll start with Polaris, and then we're going racing.
Yep.
Cool. That was a good one. All right, guys. Thanks. Tune back in for part 2 of Kyle's rodeo ride to Jackson. Thanks.
And up Jackson.
And up Jackson. Yeah, just wait. It gets better.